Regis Johnson and Arhonda Tillman.
Regis Johnson and Arhonda Tillman just went before a judge in Bartow who set their bond at $500,000 each. They're accused of starving their 2-year-old daughter to death.
If you can imagine looking at such a heartbreaking sight, basically it was just bones and skin.
A relative, Frank Robertson, who lives with him in Davenport, has also been arrested. He's accused of watching the child go downhill month after month and not reporting it. The 2-year-old was born at 6 pounds 10 ounces. 2 years and 10 months later, she had gained only 3 pounds. On Wednesday, Johnson called 911 and said the baby was not breathing. When deputies arrived, they found her dead in a blow-up pool being used as a playpen.
When this baby died on May the 10th, she couldn't stand, she couldn't talk, she couldn't walk. This baby never got to be this big because of these people.
The Department of Children and Families investigated the couple back in 2019 because the baby wasn't gaining weight. The case was closed after caseworkers decided that Tillman and Johnson were complying with an improvement plan. Tillman just told investigators that she's pregnant again. The sheriff says there's no indication that she's gotten any prenatal care, but now she will.
And when that child's born, then that child will be placed with some loving people that will raise and take care of that child, because our goal is she's never out of prison again.
She may not be the only one spending a lot of time behind bars. They're all charged with the same thing, and that is negligent child abuse. If convicted, we're talking about years and years in prison for all of them.
It is just the most horrible story I've heard in a long time.
We have to talk about something that's just, and I want you to think about this. I want you to understand that each of these blocks represents 1 pound. Horribly sad. We started an investigation where a child was starved to death, died of long-term starvation. And what shocks our conscience is nothing in this world is more important to us than our children and their growth, their ability to thrive. They're the most important, precious thing in our life. They're innocent, and they depend solely upon us for everything. So this little girl, this baby girl, was born at 6 pounds and 10 ounces. 6 pounds and 10 ounces. This baby, when it died, weighed 9 pounds. This baby should have weighed 32 pounds. This baby was born on July the 25th, 2019. Between July the 25th, 2019, and when they took the baby to the doctor, January of 2020, the child had gained 3 pounds, was thriving. Listen closely to what I'm going to tell you. Between January the 2nd, 2020, when the baby went to the doctor for the last time, and May the 10th, 2022, which was 2 years and 4 months, that sweet baby gained 1 ounce. 1 ounce. So the baby should have been 32 pounds. The baby should have been talking, putting sentences together, asking questions, telling that my diaper needs to be changed, running, jumping, and playing. When this baby died on May the 10th, she couldn't stand, couldn't talk, she couldn't walk. This baby never got to be this big because of these people. This is mom at 35. This is dad at 57. Allegedly, he was her counselor at church along the way. Oh, he weighed 213 pounds. Arhonda Tillman, mom, weighed 144 pounds. Did I mention to you that she's pregnant? According to what she says, about 4 months pregnant. There was food in the house. Regis Johnson, the dad, told us, oh, the baby ate a sandwich yesterday and some chicken nuggets last evening and drank. Well, that's just a bald-faced lie. When we did the medical examination, that child had 0 food in her stomach and only slight traces of fecal matter in the intestine. The child suffered long-term. Now, I want to call your attention, for those of you who remember the Sally Struthers commercials where she was raising money for the children that were malnourished and starving, and you'd see those horrible pictures of those children. Keep in mind, they were still alive. This baby laid in a playpen made out of an inflatable swimming pool and starved absolutely to death. Regis works for his brother at a business called First Class Card Getters on Highway 1792 between Haines City and Laufman, and that's allegedly where they lived. We know that the doctor did the things that he should have. We know that there's investigations underway. We're doing a lot more investigation. There's a lot of questions we can't answer because we're early into the investigation. There's some questions we can't answer because they're protected by DCF regulations. These folks are both charged with aggravated child neglect at this moment in time. Obviously, it is our intention to charge them with the appropriate murder charges, but we've got to do medical investigations. The medical examiner's got to complete some work before we file those charges. But we got them into jail just as soon as we could. The baby didn't thrive because they wouldn't take her to the doctor. They wouldn't feed her. On this fateful morning, the father of the year called 911 and said that his child wasn't breathing. We talked to mom. She said she'd called 911 before, but they were busy. What? They made admissions, but I want you to understand that this baby, this little girl, this child that should have been thriving, gained 1 ounce in 2 years and 4 months. If you can imagine looking at such a heartbreaking sight, basically it was just bones and skin. There aren't adequate words to explain our frustration and our sadness, but our folks are going to do a complete and thorough investigation, and we're going to lodge all of the charges that the law allows against this mother and father, against these murderers who starved this child to death. We're going to lodge all the charges that we can, and the investigation's still underway because we have probably the same questions you do. Did no one else see this child in this condition? This child just didn't get sick and pass. People had to watch this child who should have been up running and playing and talking to mama and dada. And, you know, I've got a 2-year-old grandchild and a 3-year-old grandchild that are thriving and happy and climbing all over us when they're with us. And this child couldn't talk, couldn't walk, couldn't communicate. There aren't adequate words to express my frustration. Are there any questions? The message to the community is if you don't want your child, take it to a hospital, to a fire station, to anyone, and say, turn my child in, I'm done with it. Don't starve the child. Don't starve the baby. It is unbelievable what we saw. There were no other children in the home. But you can be sure of one thing. Presuming she is pregnant, like she says, 4 months pregnant, she won't have the chance to starve another one, because our goal is that she's locked up. And when it's time to have this baby, she will have had prenatal care while she's in our custody. We have no evidence that the child to be born has had any medical care, but she'll start getting it today. And when that child's born, then that child will be placed with some loving people that will raise and take care of that child, because our goal is she's never out of prison again. She won't get another chance to starve a child to death. This investigation's underway. We don't know what we don't know about the DCF investigation at this time. I can tell you this, that there'll be a complete and thorough investigation on our part, and certainly we're going to request the same on DCF's part, but I stopped short of throwing stones at this point in the investigation at DCF, because DCF is called to hundreds of events every day. And I know and have watched them do remarkable work here. I don't know what happened in this case, but you can be sure we're going to find out. Not that I'm aware of. Keep in mind, Mom's 35, Dad's 57, and apparently he was one of her counselors at church sometime back in the day. Regis is R-E-G-I-S, Johnson, J-O-H-N-S-O-N, And Arhonda is A-R-H-O-N-D-A, Tillman, T-I-L-L-M-A-N. We are exceptionally frustrated because obviously someone had to see the child in this condition. And if this child was only 3 months old and looked like that child looked, something was wrong. Even if you didn't know that this child was 3 years old, you looked at this child and you gasped at the horror you saw and the pain this child went through. Well, I can tell you as a Christian, the only solace I get out of this whole thing is this child's no longer starving or sick, but that she is in the arms of Jesus, where as Christians we believe she's well and healthy again. And what would heaven be like if you didn't have children? They will be at first appearance in court today, and we'll be there to inform the judge and show the judge the photographs of this baby, this child, this sweet little girl, and encourage a very high bond until we can get far enough in the investigation that we can bring the appropriate murder charge. Excuse me? Not today. Not today. We still have medical work to do. So we're charging aggravated child abuse today and asking for a high bond until we can finish our investigation. The official cause of death will not be ruled upon by the medical examiner until the completion of all the investigation, but it's evident to us that it's long-term starvation. I don't know what the criminal records are. We'll get that for you. Now that's very important. Every person in society is a first reporter. So no matter who you are across this state or nation, if you see a child that's being neglected or abused, you have not only an ethical and a moral obligation, but a legal obligation in Florida to report. But tell someone, this baby can't speak. Think about it. When we have these beautiful children, these beautiful babies, they're totally dependent on us to eat, what they wear, how they grow, how they thrive. They're totally dependent on us. And these folks starved this beautiful little girl to death. Whoever called DCF, that is confidential, and we're not allowed to release it. But the people in the community that may be watching this certainly know the reputation of my homicide team, who they are simply the best team in the world. They're in a full court press to gather all the details and do a complete and thorough investigation. But if you see something or hear something, for God's sake, say something. Children's lives are at stake if you don't.
Polk County Sheriff Grady Judd giving us details on a 2-year-old starved to death and the parents who have been arrested. Alarming is the word that comes to mind. When you think of babies, you think of young children, toddlers, you're thinking of course, taken care of with big chubby cheeks, big chubby thighs. You're thinking of how cute they are at that age. It is alarming to even try to picture what this child might have looked like after gaining only, according to Sheriff Grady Judd, a single ounce, 1 ounce in weight over a 2-year, 4-month span. And that the child malnourished, starved to death. Long-term starvation is what Grady Judd says led to this child's death, although the official cause of death will be determined by the medical examiner in this case. People asking how this was able to happen. Saw a lot of comments come in about DCF, who called DCF, and I think that there's just a lot of confusion as to how this was able to happen. If you see, you heard there Sheriff Grady Judd say, if you see something, say something. If somebody had come over to this house and seen a child that was struggling and clearly malnourished, clearly suffering from starvation, there's an obligation there that you have to do something about that. And Sheriff Grady Judd, they're saying that if you see something like this, you need to say something. You need to step up. We have the first court appearance. The first appearance in court will be later on today for, of course, the two that we are talking about here. The parents in this case, that being Regis Johnson and Arhonda Tillman. And while we have these extremely alarming and disturbing details about this story and how a 2-year-old was able to die from starvation, long-term starvation, while under the care of the toddler's parents here, that being Johnson and Tillman. Arhonda here is 4 months pregnant. You might be more flabbergasted if you're a parent with this type of story, how you could allow your own child under your care to starve to death, how you could watch that happen and watch the malnourishment of your child over an extended period of time and not seek help and not do something about it. I think that there's going to be just an overwhelming amount of parents out there that feel that. But even if you're not a parent, you look at this and you just cannot believe that this was able to happen. How a young child really didn't even get a fair shot at life. Didn't even really have you heard Grady Judd there say wasn't even able to talk, form words into sentences and communicate. It's all people who should feel human empathy that should be furious and wanting these two to be locked up forever. And all our hearts should hurt for the suffering this little one went through. Martha, #AJB, this is so sad and should never have happened. Some of the things, the responses the sheriff said they gave sounds like they have major mental issues.
Regis Johnson and Arhonda Tillman.
Regis Johnson and Arhonda Tillman just went before a judge in Bartow who set their bond at $500,000 each. They're accused of starving their 2-year-old daughter to death.
If you can imagine looking at such a heartbreaking sight, basically it was just bones and skin.
A relative, Frank Robertson, who lives with him in Davenport, has also been arrested. He's accused of watching the child go downhill month after month and not reporting it. The 2-year-old was born at 6 pounds, 10 ounces. 2 years and 10 months later, she had gained only 3 pounds. On Wednesday, Johnson called 911 and said the baby was not breathing. When deputies arrived, they found her dead in a blow-up pool being used as a playpen.
When this baby died on May the 10th, she couldn't stand, she couldn't talk, she couldn't walk. This baby never got to be this big because of these people.
The Department of Children and Families investigated the couple back in 2019 because the baby wasn't gaining weight. The case was closed after caseworkers decided that Tillman and Johnson were complying with an improvement plan. Tillman just told investigators that she's pregnant again. The sheriff says there's no indication that she's gotten any prenatal care, but now she will.
And when that child's born, then that child will be placed with some loving people that will raise and take care of that child, because our goal is she's never out of prison again.
She may not be the only one spending a lot of time behind bars. They're all charged with the same thing, and that is negligent child abuse. If convicted, we're talking about years and years in prison for all of them.
It is just the most horrible story I've heard in a long time.
A chilling case of child abuse. 3 people are now facing child abuse charges after the Polk County Sheriff's Office says a child was found dead and it's believed the young girl was starved to death.
Polk County Sheriff Grady Judd says a toddler's father called police on Tuesday saying she was unresponsive and cold to the touch.
ABC Action News reporter Rochelle Aline has more details on this heartbreaking case.
And information on a local resource designed to help prevent this from happening, Rochelle.
That's right. The sheriff described that child as skin and bones. He says that for her age, she was nearly 3 years old. She should have been 30 pounds, but she was just 9 pounds when she was found. The child's mother, Arhonda Tillman, father, Regis Johnson, and uncle, Frank Robinson, are now facing charges in connection to that girl's death. There are also a lot of unanswered questions in this case, with the main one being, how did this happen? What the sheriff's office can confirm is that the child was at the center of a DCF investigation in 2019, just months after she was born, because she wasn't gaining any weight. DCF eventually closed that case after the child gained a few pounds.
And this child couldn't talk, couldn't walk, couldn't communicate. There aren't adequate words to express my frustration.
The sheriff's office also says the child's last known doctor's appointment was in January of 2020 when she was just 6 months old. They're now looking deeper into why this wasn't flagged by someone sooner.
We have probably the same questions you do. Did no one else see this child in this condition?
And we're looking into that too. ABC Action News has contacted DCF for more information on that closed investigation. But tonight, we also wanted to speak to some experts about preventing child abuse or neglect from happening in the first place. We spoke to Champions for Children in Tampa Bay, and they say neglect and abuse often happens when parents are isolated and struggling to bond with their children. They also say that the stigma surrounding asking for help often keeps people from reaching out.
And our belief is, and the research shows, that if you are attached and bonded with your child, you have love for your child, you're not going to hurt your child and you're not going to let anyone else hurt them either.
That group offers a variety of services that range from things like parenting classes to child development classes and bonding activities.
We start with a horrible story out of Polk County. 2 people are in custody on aggravated child neglect charges after the death of a young girl. Sheriff Grady Judd says he wants to add to those charges. Regis Johnson and Arhonda Tillman are in jail waiting to go before a judge. Sheriff Judd says the nearly 3-year-old girl suffered from long-term starvation and weighed only 9 pounds when she died. He says his office wants both of these people charged with murder, but they need the results of a medical investigation first. At today's press conference, Judd talked about the girl's condition.
Even if you didn't know that this child was 3 years old, you looked at this child and you gasped at the horror you saw and the pain this child went through.
Sheriff Judd says he will personally be there to talk to the judge about this case and ask for a high bond.
The little girl's parents, Regis Johnson and Arhonda Tillman, and another family member, Frank Robertson, are all accused of withholding food from the baby month after month until she couldn't hold out any longer and finally died.
When we did the medical examination, that child had 0 food in her stomach.
At one point back in 2019, the family was on the radar of the Department of Children and Families. The case was closed after an undisclosed period of time, after investigators felt Johnson and Tillman were feeding the 2-year-old better and she was improving. That's typically what happens, according to former prosecutor and family law attorney Joshua Sheridan.
If the child was gaining weight over the period of time, if they had done welfare checks or surprise checks and the refrigerator was full and, the house was clean and all these sorts of things, if that happens enough over a period of time and they're not terminating parental rights, at some point they'll say, okay, we've done what we can do here and kind of close the book.
It's unclear if the state ever followed up, but one thing is clear. Other players in the state's child protective system paint a picture of DCF as an agency under duress.
I stopped short of throwing stones at this point in the investigation at DCF because DCF is called to hundreds of events every day.
Heartland for Children, one of the community agencies that contracts with the state to adopt out and foster kids, just released this statement. This case is an example of why a strong child welfare system with a stable workforce, adequate resources, services, and supports is so important. There are still a lot of questions that need to be answered to understand the full picture. So it appears at this point, DCF may have followed its own protocols. But the question is, was that enough?
And usually what happens is something like this that causes people to take attention and look at how can we make this better. So, hopefully maybe this triggers some kind of reform.
Before the next child dies of starvation or abuse.
And I can tell you that we've reached out to DCF multiple times over the last 24 hours. Her response, a written statement, something, but we haven't gotten anything at this point. Back to you.
And Ken, much like what we went through with learning about security over the last 10 years and terrorism, probably a horrible analogy, but it reminds me of something we just need to come back to think about is if you see something, say something. And if we see that the system like this maybe just isn't quite set up to protect this child, maybe one day maybe they were neighbors, maybe there's something else, maybe there's another case. Just want to remind people, if they ever see something, a situation like this where they want to question, make sure they contact somebody. Who knows if it would have made a difference here. It's tragic indeed, though.